Jesus H. Roosevelt Christ, that was an intense episode. It's time to talk about it here on the Book Refuge. Okay, my friends, holy crap. We have so much to discuss, and I'd like to pretend that I'm going to get done with this in a decent time because I have something to get to in a little bit, but you know what? It might just be a bit late because just pulling my notes together for this one, it is going to take us a while. I did not fash Sassenach sweater on. I just got this from a generic Etsy shop many years ago. But I got to tell you, this Sassenach is fashing very hard. Okay, I don't know about you, but that was intense. It also pretty much happened how I thought it would, which is always very exciting as a book lover. There was also a couple small disappointments, which I'll get into. I had a bit of a perkful hope at the very beginning of the episode, and I feel like they teased us really hard, or at least me. I'm sure not everyone feels the same way as me because they don't care about it as much, but I was a little upset about a few teases that they did, but we'll get to that. So yeah, sorry, my sticky notes are all over the place for this one. But yeah, like I said, we're not going to waste any time with this. We're going to get right into the recap portion because y'all, I took, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pages of notes. So we got a lot to go through, and a lot of that is just because there was a lot of quick scene changes, and also I wrote down so many quotes because they were so fucking good that I just kept writing things down. I knew that I wanted to film this one today, and as I've shared before, I usually watch it without taking notes the first time. And then the next day, like while I'm just hanging out, I'll watch it again and like take notes and everything. But I'm not going to be able to film on Saturday the way I normally would. So I have to film it today, which means I did take notes while I was watching last night, which meant it took me a long time to watch it because I had to pause it and everything. And it was just, it was a lot. It was a lot. But it was so good. So I am going to watch it again still, but this time I'm going to watch it without taking notes because I think the pacing was excellent with this one. We really moved it along. And I mean, you'll have to wait and see what I rate this one when we get there, but spoiler alert, it's going to be pretty high. So as I always say, I'm going to go through my recap, then I'm going to do a comparison between the show and the book and how well I think they interpreted it. That's really more what this has become since we are like hopping around a lot through the book. And then I will give my rating, and then I will give my predictions for the final episode. Yes, oh my gosh, we're going to be going back into Outlander already. But at least it looks like this will be a shorter Outlander than things we've had, barring any, you know, things happening in Hollywood, because they are done filming the final season. And I'll have some predictions for our final season as well, and what, at least the things that I know happen in Go Tell the Bees anyway. But yeah, so that's enough. Let's go ahead and get into this recap, and then we'll go from there. Alrighty, so we start off this episode, written in my own heart's blood, with a flashback in the beginning. And it is a flashback with a voiceover from Claire talking about war. And it discusses, like it starts with one of the first scenes of the show ever, with showing her at the end of World War II with blood on her apron and that. And then it flashes through all the different battles we've seen throughout the years, right? And she says this quote, like, there's always a war coming, and war is inevitable, and death is too, which very ominous type of thing. It definitely brought to mind a bit of the, like, foreshadowing type things that happen in, like, Forever My Love, if you remember that episode. And other ones like that, where there's been that kind of, like, heavy feeling, you know? So if people have never read the books or don't know what was coming, I imagine that they were having that sense of foreboding with that too. So yeah, we have that flash. This was, so then we have the intro, and then I want to mention the title card this time, because this is where I was teased really badly, okay? I'm admitting it. because I was thinking we were finally going to see Tobias Menzies maybe in a flashback with Bree, because they show this title card of it's little Bree and Frank looking at a piece of art depicting a battle. And I know that wasn't Tobias Menzies back, because it's definitely a like stand-in for him. But I got a little hopeful, okay? Because also when they did the previously on, there was certain things that were brought up in the previously on that made me think we might see him. And I know I had just said previously that I'd finally given up that we were going to see him. Although I will say we did kind of see him. We saw his picture anyway, but I was hopeful maybe even we'd get a voiceover. I'll talk about why, but we didn't. But I will say that they really teased with this one. And even when there was a thing, sorry, we'll get to it, where Roger says there's still something we need to do, I was like, oh my gosh, is this when he's going to go try one last chance and maybe ask the army if they've seen a little, you know, I thought that's what he might do. But we didn't. So anyway, moving on. But I will say they definitely teased me in this one that we would see him. But it was more of like we had a very small reference to him. But okay, so then we are in 1778. Let me make sure I have the dates right. Yes, we're in 1778, and this is supposed to be the Battle of Monmouth, I believe. I had written that down last time, yeah. And so June 28th is when that battle happens in real life, anyway. So then we go to before the battle, and we have Jamie sitting in front of, like at the front of the tent with the sun shining on them, and there's this beautiful scene between them, and one of the lines he says, there's so many great Jamie Fraser lines in this. This is why it took me so long. I wrote down so many quotes, you guys. Oh my gosh. Stuff right from the book too. The only time I'm without pain is when I'm in your bed, which is a beautiful line, and Claire agrees with him. And then he ends up speaking about death, and specifically the death of his mother. And there's this, it's so well shot too, because there's just the rising sun, which we know is bringing the battle, is like on his face, and he's sitting right there, and she's like, you need your rest, and he's like, I'm not gonna be able to sleep. There's this, you know, that you get before the battle. And anyway, it's beautiful. And they talk about his mother. I don't believe that this scene happens here, but this is a scene from the book. I didn't go to look, but I actually think it was in maybe a previous one about a battle. I'm not sure. I didn't directly look, but I know it doesn't happen right in this scene because I pulled up this specific scene. But he mentions, you know, seeing his mother, and that he wanted to look at his mother one last time. So after they prepared her for burial, he talked about how his father had undone her hair to make her hair look like it would normally, you know, the way that the father sees her, because in death she didn't look like herself. And the baby brother that she had died birthing was also beside her, and he mentioned how there was no gray in her hair or anything, and she was only 38 years old, which very sad to see. And he comments on Claire where he says, to see, I'm starting already, you guys, to see the years touch you brings me joy, for it means that you live. And so, yeah, talking about loving seeing her go gray, which is just, guys, I can't start crying already. We're not even into this episode yet. But then he asks her to lay with him, and so he lays back down, and he's like, you sleep, and I'll rise with a clear mind and do what must be done. And he is also like worrying about William, and, you know, the last thing that he ever said to him was something in anger, and what if that's the last time I see him? And they also talk about, say that you love me. We're not going to say goodbye or farewell, just say you love me. And, you know, there's just this moment of like, is this going to be the last time we see each other type of thing? And we think it's going to be, right, like Jamie, because he's always the one getting injured in battles. We've had many of them. And he is like walking away, but he turns back around and he comes up to her and he's like, it will not be today, Sassenach. And she says, promise me. And he says, I promise. So he's made a promise, and Jamie Fraser doesn't break his promises. And then the last little bit that rounds this off is we get this other flashback, which is clearly to at least the night before, and not when they were in the room together. They're by a fire. They're looking out at the sky and the stars, and it is shot where it's in like sepia. That's what I wrote in my notes. I remember it's in this, like, it's not quite black and white, but it's like in the sepia, and we will flash back to that moment multiple times in this, but there's a discussion happening about her feeling like she's being kind of Macrobé about it, of like, do you ever feel this sucking void that you feel pulled into? She's being very kind of like dark about it, and it kind of goes through that line for being like, there's always a war, you know, and feeling like pulled into that, you know. Okay, so then this is another one that has all 3 time periods on it, but it might be the last one. It should be the last time. We have 3 different time periods, right? So praise the Lord for that. So then we go to 1739, and we have Buck and Roger. And I didn't write down every little quote for this one because I am going to speed through those scenes because I have so much more to talk about in other places. But this is kind of an important scene. And it does have to do with like Buck and Roger are talking, and they're talking about fathers and mother, and about like who might the traveler be. And so this was kind of an interesting thing because he's like, if you're a traveler and I'm a traveler and your son's a traveler and your father's a traveler, is my father a traveler? And this is how in the show, at least, it leads into Roger telling him, well, your father wasn't a traveler, but your mother is. And he says who his mother is, and also who his father is. And Buck is very upset in here because he's like, why didn't you tell me? He's like, well, I didn't want you to mess it up. And Buck does point out a few good things. He's like, you got a chance to talk to your father. Why don't I get the chance to do that? And it is a good point. It is a good point, you know. Roger acts like he knows so much more about this, but does he? Does he really know so much more about all of this than Buck does? They're all just trying to figure out how it is. And so they're kind of like bickering back and forth about it. And like Buck brings up the point that, you know, you're saying that they had to meet there. Well, they only met because we were here. You know, Dougal went there because we were there, and that's how they meet, is because of us. So you're saying we're not supposed to mess stuff up, but they wouldn't have even met if we weren't here. So he's bringing up some subtle but very important points that get into the whole mythology of the series as a whole. Is like, is the time unraveling the way it always unraveled? Is this time traveling really even affecting things or not? But yet we also will have some another interesting point to that later on that also brings up another question of maybe it's not predestined. So there's so many layers, and Buck bringing this up, it's a good one. So, he's a bit upset that he gets to, like, Roger got to talk to his dad, but then, like, he didn't. So then we go back to 1778, and now we're dealing with the army surgeon there being a bit of a douche canoe and saying that Claire is a woman and that she'll be hysterical and she's getting in the way. And Denzel is giving the surgeon a what for and being like, she's the best surgeon that I know. She's going to be the best one here. And this guy is all like, you're not going to touch my patients, blah, blah, blah. And so Claire's just like, okay, well, I'll work the triage out front and we'll bring in the really bad ones to you in here. And yeah, but Denny, I love Denny. Denny is like standing up for her, and I love Denny, okay? I love him, and this is an episode where he really gets to shine because he's going to save our butts, okay? Denzel Hunter and all, you know, the few interactions they've been able to have together, she's taught him a lot. And we're going to see if those skills she imparted to this young man will now save her bacon, which, I mean, again, spoiler alert, they will. We're not at the end of the series yet. Then we have another sepia flashback here, and Claire saying something feels different. And now Jamie starts to poke in, and he's saying, you know, a warrior has hope that his death will matter. You know, we all have to die, but a warrior who is very aware that his death is possible and also likely, but there's a hope that it can change the tides or it can be a powerful thing, you know. very Jamie Fraser of him to say. Then we come back and we have Rachel with Claire, and they're getting things set up in the tent outside. She's explaining like where they're going to be for triage and how that's going to work. And Rachel is a bit scared, and she has some good self-reflection here. I think this is good for her because this is the contradiction of, you know, these two Quakers, both Rachel and Denny. And let's remember too, Denny is the one feeling more passionately about the revolution than Rachel does. You know, like obviously she's on board with this. She now has a husband who's involved in this. But she still doesn't feel fully okay about it, right? And she's also worried that some of her principles that she has conveyed to Ian, will that cause him to hesitate in battle and then cause her to be left alone, a widow, because she has wanted him to be more cautious about taking life. So at least she's very cognizant of that, and I appreciate us seeing that layer to her character. So then we go to Ian and John, who they're on their way to the Hessian camp to try to bluff their way out of this. Now, one of the things to like remind you, this isn't a full company of Hessians. This is a small group of them who it will be guessed that they're actually like deserters, and they're going to be ransoming William to, like they're supposed to, the idea in the show and is that they're supposed to be doing that, right? Because they want to blackmail Hal, who is part of Parliament and is high up in British government, and John. Like, that was the whole point of kidnapping William. So we go through that whole scuffle. They're able to get away, or like they kill a couple of them. The one guy runs away, and he says, "You're going to regret this, blah, blah, blah." So we untie William and John. Like, John, okay, I'm going to say too, John looks so sexy in this whole episode. I'm sorry, not sorry. He's at that scene like we saw in the photos in the beginning. Like, this actually has the one where, like, he's no longer completely scarred from everything, but he has his eye patch and his, like, leather duster on. And he, like, does that, like, sidelong glance with it. And I'm just like, I want it. Okay, I'm just saying it. I'm just saying. So anyway, Ian and William have a bit of a moment of like, you know, because John's saying you need to get back to your bride, and he's like smiling at him saying thank you for helping, and Ian says to him, he's like, "Fare thee well, cousin," and William is like, "Yes, fare thee well." And so now Ian, we see, is headed back, and I'll just go ahead and clear up, like, I'll get to this next scene. The Hessian that escaped, or Ian let him go, which, again, we see, like, we're now remembering that scene because he had said he has him at knife point, and he's like, "We don't need to kill you today." And we reflect back, well, like, will that cause problems? For, you know, like, is he being too compassionate because of what, like, Rachel said or whatever, right? You know, is he hesitating to kill because of me? And that man said, like, "You're going to regret that." So we're thinking like, uh-oh, is this guy going to come back and bite us in the ass? Well, Ian doesn't let the man get too far away, and he jumps out of the woods and kills him. And I think there's two reasons for that. Well, one main reason for that. I think it is he's like, he doesn't need someone like skulking around trying to kill him anymore, right? We already did that. He was on his toes for a very long time waiting for Mr. Bug to try to show up and kill him. And so he says, he's like, yeah, I'm not going to wait around for that. And he does seem like they try to make him look really like upset that he like did this. But I also think like he's not going to let anything be a threat to his family anymore. And if this guy was like, "You're going to regret that," he's like, yeah, probably shouldn't let him live to be able to tell people that they know that he knows too. So I don't know. But anyway, so in between that, we went back to Claire with triaging, and there is a man who has like probably a collapsed lung. He has a sucking chest wound, and so they bring him inside, and the guy's trying to be all like, no, he's fine, he just needs to breathe. And she's like, no. And so she like cuts a spot and like jabs a tube in and everything, and the guy's like, well, I guess you know, he's trying to say he's wrong. She's like, "I don't care what your credentials are. You're wrong. You're being a fool." Like, she's just totally putting him in his place. She's very much in Surgeon Claire mode, which it's been a while since we've seen that mode. But if you kind of remember too, more back in the, I mean, in like the times when they showed those flashbacks, right? Those are different times where she's been in surgeon mode, where she stops putting up with any bullshit. She stops playing the games and she just goes right in on it. And I think it's been a while since we've seen that like change for her. Not that she hasn't been surgeoning or being a doctor or whatever, but when it is a battle situation, she goes in, you know, she starts talking a little more modern sometimes about things too. She stops using the same terms that she would use. She's like, goes into that mode. And I mean, I really love when we get to see that. Okay, then we go back to William and LJG. They've now arrived at the British camp. And William immediately goes back to being a brat about this. But again, I have patience for this. I know that when we are seeing it in the arc of a series or a season, it can feel like, oh, you're still upset about this. But it has not been very long, let's be clear too. Overall, like this has not been a lot of time. And he has not spoken to his father since he found this out either. So it might seem like, wow, are we still bringing this up? But it doesn't bother me because we still haven't been able to have it out. Like, he hasn't talked to his father about it. He's talked to Jamie in one scene where Jamie's threatening him to let Ian go. And then, you know, he's had stuff with Jane and stuff with all that, but he hasn't talked to his dad yet. So I'm okay with this, like, back and forth, because William's still feeling like, who am I? He's like, who am I? Am I William Ransom? Am I William this? Am I William Fraser? Because I'm not William Gray. Because that's the thing too, like, either way, whether he'd been Jamie's son or whatever, he was always like, John is his stepdad, and not even like that either, you know what I mean? He's adopted by him, but he has, you know, oh, that's what he says. He says William Ransom, Ellesmere, Fraser. It's certainly not Gray, which is like, he's being a brat, it's all right. And he's like, what is my name? Who am I? And John says, you're my son. You're my son. All those other things, you might not know who you are, but you're my son, whatever your name is. And I'm just like, yeah, John, tell him who he is, right? I love it. And then he says, he's like, you could have done a lot worse for a sire as it is. And he's like, I would never betray my country. He's a traitor. He's a groom, you know, all those things that he thinks. And Jamie throws it back. He's like, I never betray my country. And John says something important. He's like, never is not a word to be trifled with. Things are not always so straightforward. And this is true, if anything. Like, what have we just seen John have to go through in the last few episodes of like switching sides and hiding this way? And even before then, when him and Claire were married for the short period of time, like, probably never thought that he would sleep with a woman again, like all of these things, you know. And then John is reminding me, he's like, he's one of the most honorable people that I know, and he deserves like your respect. And I love it. You know, John doesn't gush about Jamie too often, but we get to see that of his genuine, like, he is someone that I would have in my back, no question, right? So very good. Okay, now we go to 1739 again. And now we're back at Lollybrock. We just have a quick we barely have an interaction with Brian. He's mostly went back to Lollybrock to leave a letter for Bree. So this is kind of a cool moment where, as I said, we've had this discussion with Buck about, you know, the things that we've done that we're trying to be careful about, like, have they already happened? You know, like, you sent your father back to, you know, is he still, like, he still died. And like, if we hadn't been here, my parents wouldn't meet. Like, we've had that side of the conversation. Well, now we see directly something a bit different, because there was not this letter from Roger before, when he was in the past or in the present with his wife and family, until he's went back here, written this letter and put it in the drawer. And then we flip to Bree, who is back at Lollybrock, which I don't have time to go into the fact that, like, why is she back there again? When the time that she left, they were running out of there with Rob and, is it McAllister and those people stalking her home? Why is she just, like, back at home in the daytime, not worried about anything? Like, we don't explain that. We just need to get her there. So that's why they do kind of mess up with this timing. And I'll talk about it when we get to the book, because the book has all of those things happen in the right order the right order. Whereas this one, like, I know we didn't get to the point where he wrote the letter and put it in there yet. So she needed to be back there to find that letter in the drawer, in the secret drawer at Lollybrock. It had to be there. But it doesn't make sense with what has already been shown happening, because the last time they left, they ran away from there because Rob and those people were waiting for them, and they were supposed to go to, like, get away to family. Like, that's, you know, what Ernie said, and that's what they were going to do. And again, in the book, do that. That's already happened. So, yeah. So that doesn't make sense to me why she's back there. But this is where she pulls the book out of the, wall, and it's Frank's book, and it says The Soul of a Rebel, and she opens it to the back, and it has a picture of Frank. So like I said, we do see Tobias Menzies. He has a photo credit, I guess, in here, but it shows her just opening the book, which I guess is supposed to be the reference to the title card, but we're missing some stuff there. Some stuff that I really wanted us to get to, which we'll talk about in the comparison. But either way, she's written a letter for Roger that says, we went back to find you, because she's like, well, if he comes back and we haven't made it back, I'm going to put it here. And I believe we're supposed to maybe think that she, because they don't fully show us like what she wrote to her, but you know, maybe she's telling him which time and which place they're going to go to and be waiting for him, possibly. So either way, when she opens the drawer, there's now the letter from Roger. And so she's like, oh my gosh. So now she knows he's not in 1778. He's in 1739. So now she knows where he is, and that'll be important. So great to see that bit. So then we go to 1778, and we're back at the British camp, and we have Franny is frantic. Jane was arrested for killing Harkness because there was another guy there that recognized her from that night, and she's been arrested, and she's going to be hanged for killing Harkness. So she's in prison right now, and William's like, wait here, and then he runs after to find her. Then we go to 1739, and we're still at Lollybrock here, and the guys are drinking a bit together, which apparently Brian is just fine letting these men roam around. So he's got shit to do anyway, I guess. But they're there, and there's a really kind of cool scene where Buck is having a moment of like, you're all my sons. You're all my blood. And it's just a cute, touching scene. That's fine. Then we go to 1780, and we have our last scene in this episode of them. And now they are back at the Stones, and she's dressed the kids in period-appropriate attire. She's going to have to leave her dolly behind. And she tells them, like, we're going to feel for Daddy. We're going to feel for him. And as soon as, like we hear the buzzing going, and as soon as we hear that, Mandy runs for the Stones because she's like, Daddy! And remember, like, Mandy has some of the strongest feel for this of anyone. So, you know, being near the Stones, and in my opinion, being at like the yawning edge of all of time, like being able to be drawn to these different times, I'm sure she's like, he's right there. And to her, it's just stepping through the veil to get there. And I also have a theory too, in my opinion. This has, I don't think, ever been confirmed within the book. This is just my opinion. I think it's easier to travel the more amount of like traveler genes that you have. Like, I think the more concentrated that it is, the less painful the stones are, and the bolder your connection is and everything. And that's personally why I think that Mandy and Jem don't have the same effects going through. And even like Bree and Roger, to a certain degree, like, it doesn't seem to hurt them as much as it does for Claire. Like, for Claire, it's very intense for her to go through. And for like each generation after, I think it's a little less traumatic for their bodies. Not that they still don't need to be careful about it. I don't think they should just be hopping through willy-nilly. But I do think that it's evidence kind of in like Mandy and Jem that it does get a little bit easier to do the more concentrated the gene is for it. So anyway, that's the last time we see them in 1980, and we get to cross off a time period from our long list of them. But we ain't done, y'all. We ain't done. We got to keep it going here. So now we're in 1779 and the Redcoats are coming. Claire stays when Denny and Rachel are going to be leaving. So what's going to happen is that the Redcoats are approaching on where they are at. I actually wrote this down. This church is called, because I don't remember when it's said in the show, but the church is called Tennant Church in the town of Freehold is where they are at. And you know, it's a field hospital and a church as a tent. And those places are supposed to be kind of like neutral. You're not supposed to go after those. That's just like battle warfare rules. But still, they are going to be evacuating with the prisoners who are able to move. And they're trying to get Claire to go. And she's like, I'm not going to be going. And even the surgeon, who's a bit of a douche, as we say, is like, even I'm going to go once I have some more of my patients stable. And she's like, I have an obligation to these men and I won't leave them here to die. And you can tell the guy, like, his respect is growing for her, as it usually does when you see her being a badass. Then we switch to Jamie, who they are advancing. They see the Redcoats advancing on the church and his men are like running up there. And now it appears that like there's not supposed to be really battle happening right there, but it's not even a full-on fight. But some of the like retreating men and the like the Redcoats and the rebels there, they do start firing on each other. And now the hospital is in the middle of this back and forth. And so Jamie is coming upon, like they're coming, him and his men are coming back that way. And he sees the Redcoats coming and they're supposed to be like passing by. So Jamie is getting there just as just a few shots go off and he can see Claire up on the tent and he sees her get shot and fall. So now we enter a very scary part of the story, very intense here. Very emotional, very fantastic act. Like this whole rest of this is chills the whole time. I didn't even have time to cry because I was so sucked into it. This is some of my favorite things. And all honesty too, because it's usually the other way around of Claire being able to help, right? And she has skills. So she's able to compartmentalize when she is, even when it's Jamie or Bree or Roger, like, yes, this is a loved one, but she's able to like compartmentalize, like, hold on, soldier, while she's doing it. For Jamie, it's just like absolute panic and horror. This isn't an illness that he can, you know, sit there dabbing her brow for. Like, this is immediate danger. And the person who he always looks to help, she's the one that's hurt. So, anyway, so she's been shot. Jamie's trying to hold pressure on it. Luckily, well, we think luckily, the surgeon hadn't left yet. So they bring her inside and they're like, she's not dying. And she is gushing blood from, and it's a gut shot. So the bullet's stuck in there. Okay. And this surgeon who, to be fair, though, like we hate him kind of already, he looks at this wound, how much it's bleeding. And for the skills that he has, he's like, I'm so sorry. There's nothing that I can do. Now, we can hate on him. It's fine. We hate on him. But when we look at, because he's incompetent, we can say that, whatever. But again, for the skills he had at the time, for the amount of people who are injured, the fact that it's soldiers and he's here for them, it's still an absolutely horrifying moment. But like, why am I even being fair to him? I don't know. But the point is, he says he can't do anything. And it's not that he's lying out of malice. That's my whole point. He's not lying. Like, his skills are he can't. And in fact, if he had tried to help Claire, he probably would butcher her, right? He's not going to use the same type of sanitation that she's taught to Denny. You know, he's not going to wear a mask when he does it. He's not going to be like it. He probably would have killed her if he'd been the one to do it anyway, even if he tried. So Claire knows that she's going to shock, and she's like, the shock is what's going to kill you. And then as Jamie is like absolutely freaking out about this, which, by the way, oh, I skipped it. He calls the man a whore for not helping because the man is retreating and leaving. And it's great. It's such a great scene. We'll read the actual lines when we get to the book, but he's just in an absolute panic. And then I feel bad for this corporate or whoever he is like, generally is asking for you. And Jamie is like, fuck no. So then we skip to, like, we're having this horrifying moment. The general's asking for Jamie. Jamie's holding Claire's, like, wound. And we go back to the sepia moment of them looking at the stars. And, you know, Claire says, like, the sky is kind of an abyss of a sort, and all of those stars out there are already dead or dying, and due to, like, the law of thermodynamics and blah, blah, blah. She's being scientific about it. And Jamie says, the men can make all the laws they like, but God made hope. And that's what, like, the stars are. So the stars will not burn out, and nor will we. So then we skip back to this horrifying moment that we're living in. And again, the guy's saying, Jenn really wants you. You have to come. And Jamie's like, fuck no, I'm not coming. And then he tells the guy to take off his coat and his shirt. Take it off. And he does. And he says, turn around. And so using Claire's blood that has soaked into the table, he writes, I resign, Jay Fraser, and says, go show that to General Lee. And the guy's like, please don't. He's in a bad temper. And he's like, go. So then he goes back and he's holding her in, and she says, here, holding her wound, and says, I need Denny. Go get Denny. So then we have this, you know, we're waiting for Denny. We don't know how far away that he had gotten with the retreat, or how far he is, but he sends someone to get him. And so Jamie repeats those words. He says, I love you, Claire, and the stars will not burn out, and nor will we. So he repeats that to her while he's holding her in. And then we cut to him, like, holding her wound with his, like, head down. And there's this beautiful line, because they're in a church, right? And he says, this is your house, Lord, but your angels have no dominion here. They will not take her. I will not give her up. Beautiful moment. So then Denny arrives in time, and Denny is going to do his very, very best. He is going to use all the things that she's taught him so far. He's going to wear a mask. He's going to keep things clean. And Claire is she's like, it might be in the liver due to how much that I'm bleeding. And, you know, he's going to do his best. And Jamie says something that harkens all the way back to season 1. He says, do not leave me, Claire, and this time I will beg. And if you don't recall, let me refresh your memory. In season 1, or in episode, what is it? Episode, I don't know, 13, 14. After she's told him that she's a time traveler, he brings her back to Craignadoon and leaves her at the stones to go back to Frank. And he says, I'm not going to beg you to stay with me. I'll wait down the hill through nightfall to make sure no one comes to bother you. And farewell. And he didn't beg to keep her, but she stayed for him. And so he's saying this time, like, please don't leave, and I'll beg if I have to. And he says, do not go from me. And then Denny looks at Jamie and he says, Jamie, pray. And then as Claire succumbs to the laudanum, we see the screen go, we pan back to that sky, and we see all the stars go out but one. And that's the end of episode 15. Whew! All right. Talked so much to say there. Fucking fantastic. Okay, fantastic. Let's get into the book scenes, but gosh, this was so, I knew this would be so good. And it was so good. Okay, so let's quickly go through comparison stuff. So I'm going to go character by character for this one. As always, I have my book and I have my notes and I have everything here. So the stuff that is the most convoluted here, okay? Because again, once we get to the Jamie and Claire stuff, that like all of that is in here like chronologically because it's happening in like on one day basically. But the Roger and Bree stuff we have picked, as we have with their story through the whole way, we have like skipped around a lot, which can get very confusing. Okay, so hi everyone. I don't know where I had to cut off that last bit, but I was confused myself. I thought I'd taken my notes correctly. I had to go back and reread this part, right? This is why I am not perfect, and I'm glad that I noticed this because I would have been really embarrassed to put it all out there. So again, I'm not sure where I cut off what I was last saying. So putting this in here, the stuff with Bree and Roger, that is the most confusing. That's where I'm going to go back to. So you guys won't know this. I cut like 10 minutes of this video out and re-put this in because I was doing it wrong. So the thing about the Bree and Roger part that's the most confusing is the fact that she goes back to Lollybrock and finds this note there. Because when she leaves at the end of the last episode, it is in a hail of gunfire with Rob and those people there waiting for her. So she's not just going to go back to Lollybrock, write a note for Roger, look at her father's book, and dawdle there. They left while they were in danger, and they need to get the hell out of there, right? And in the books, she leaves Scotland and goes to America. She sees her Uncle Joe for a little bit. There's actually a chapter from Joe's point of view in the book at one point. And then she goes to like California, and I think I'm not sure if like Gail is there and that's why she's there. But either way, she's actually there on December 5th of 1980. And she's trying to prepare things for her to go after Roger. So she is going to try to go to him, but she doesn't know where he is at this point, right? She doesn't know what time it is. And so Roger does leave that note in there, and it wasn't there before because he hadn't left it there yet in the back time. Like he hadn't put it there yet. But he puts it in there, and it is someone else who finds it. And so she finds a envelope and a 18th century letter that Uncle Joe forwards to her in California. And Joe leaves a little note that says, "I hope this catches you in time. It came from an estate agent in Scotland. He said when the new tenant at Lollybrock went to put the furniture in storage, he couldn't get the big oak desk through the door. So they called an antiques guy to take it apart very carefully, and he assures me. And when they did, they found 3 Queen Victoria stamps on this. I didn't read it. If you haven't left yet, let me know if you want the stamps. Lenny Jr. collects them," blah, blah, blah. So there's a letter that was left in there, and it isn't Bree who finds it. So again, I understand why they didn't put all that in there, but I do think they should have found some other way. Maybe I don't know. But the fact that she goes back to Lollybrock after they left in guns the night before, I don't think was the smartest. Like, why did we have it happen that way? I don't know. But anyway, so then there's the letter, and it's basically, this is what it says in here. And he wrote this letter in November 5th, 1739. And it says to be kept until called for on it. And it says this: "My dearest heart, I know what you're thinking, and I don't know. My best idea is that I've come in search of Jeremiah and found him, or may have found him, but not the person I thought I was looking for. I sought help at Lollybrock, where I met Brian Fraser. You would like him, and he you. And through him, with the assistance of Captain Jack Randall, of all people, came into possession of a set of RAF identification discs. I recognize the information on them. We, Buck is still with me, have been searching for gems since our arrival and have found no sign at all. I won't give up, of course you know that, but as our inquiries have borne no fruit in the northern clanlands, I feel I must follow that one clue I have and see if I can locate the owner of those tags. I don't know what might happen, and I had to leave you some word, however faint the chance that you'll ever see it. God bless you and Jem wherever he is, poor little guy, and I can only hope and pray he's safe. And my sweet Mandy, I love you. I'll love you forever. R." So she is in the process of getting things ready for them to go to the past, but doesn't know where Roger is. And she possibly would have went, back to the time where like her parents are at this point, and we would have been in a kerfuffle. But her thoughts at the time are she's like selling a lot of their stuff. She had like Lollybrock had been sold apparently very quickly because it's December 5th and they left there October whatever. Or maybe it's in the process of, it says the new tenant. Okay, so they were renting it. Got it. But anyway, so now she knows. She's like, oh my God. And then we have him a bit looking at she's looking at the Practical Guide for Time Travelers, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about that. But then covering the other Bree stuff. So anyway, that was mostly my point, is I was like, I get why we didn't have time to go to America and show that stuff. But I wish she'd been maybe staying anywhere else. Like, I don't know. She's staying with one of her dad's old colleagues in Oxford or something that he knows, like, and then Joe forwarded this letter to her, whatever. But having her go back into Lollybrock after they left it, like, just the night before, like, and maybe it's not just the night before, I don't know, but whatever. That didn't make sense. So anyway, but otherwise the stuff is kind of the same with her going back. That happens in chapter 106 now when they go back, and I won't tell the entire thing of it because we haven't seen all of the conclusion of that, but it does go pretty much the same with them going to the stones and her saying, think of daddy, and we have that part. So that ends right there. And one of the things that's different though is it's actually Lionel Mingus, who is Rob's cousin and was the school teacher. He's actually like helps them leave because Rob is still after them. Like, they've come back to Scotland just in time for December 21st to go through. And again, Rob and them were waiting for them. So that didn't make any sense, right? Didn't make any sense. But anyway, they think of him and they go through. So that's what happened with them. Now the differences that happen with Roger and Buck. The main differences here being that the way the show kind of did it differently is they had and I think I talked about this at the time, in the book, they don't see Galus as being the healer. They see someone else, and that healer is also a traveler. His name is McEwen, and he's a traveler as well, and he's currently with Galus. Roger and him talk a bit about the fact that Galus is a succubus, basically, and she's awful. And it's after he's now told Buck who his mother and father is that he wants to talk to her. So they go to see her, and Galus tries to fuck Buck. Okay, that rhymes, I know. And he does kiss her, and so it makes me think that this is a hereditary thing of Mackenzie men liking to kiss their ancestors. Well, in this case, with Buck, it's his direct mother. He kisses her. She's going to try, she literally is like trying to fuck him, and he stops himself. And he says later to Roger, like, why didn't you tell me my mother was a whore? And he's like, well, I wasn't going to say that about someone's mom, like, whatever. But anyway, and then he's like, do you want to see Dougal? Like, do you want to talk to Dougal? And he's like, no, but I just wanted to have that interaction. So that's kind of the difference. Again, I understood why they didn't show the Galus like kissing him and stuff. I was fine with them skipping that, but there was that interaction with McGowan that was interesting because McGowan actually heals Roger's throat, and it's done in a bit of magic. So this is a point where like he ends up looking at his throat and he touches it and he heals him. So it's kind of interesting. And there's a bit more discussion of like traveling there, which is always interesting when we have that discussion. But anyway, so that's basically the differences with that. But it basically is all ended the same way, where Bree and the kids have gone through. They know where Roger supposedly is at that time. Mandy says, Daddy. She hears him. We're going through. And Roger and Buck are kind of just hanging out in the area. So that is the same. Okay, now to get to the Jamie and Claire stuff. And again, this is a pretty straightforward follow for the most part. And it starts with chapter 84, which is the night before. The biggest differences of this are things I've already touched on. We're missing some characters. We don't have Fergus or Germaine hanging out around here. Because Fergus has kind of like joined up with them looking for Germaine because his son has like disappeared and joined the army or whatever. And Lord John Grey is doing a lot more rummaging around. Now, again, I also touched on this with William, that he isn't so much bringing a letter to the Hessians as like there's some Hessian deserters, I believe. They get in a little back and forth. I'm trying to find the page now. Where is it? I write down the pages of things. It is it 432 that happens? Yeah, it happens back here, I guess. Let me find it. Yes, he had fallen down a ravine And this was when like Ian finds him, drags him out of there. Then he is like rescued him. He runs into Jamie, who's in the middle of the battle. He says, send a few people with me and I'll take care of his lordship. And then LJG is running around and he runs into them. So there's just a lot of like people passing in the night. So I understand why we condensed it down. We still in the show had Ian and John being the ones who go rescue William, but it's a little more straightforward and less a series of like stumbling into each other things, which is fine because the show needs to be a bit more narrative about that. We do still have the conversation about who his father is, but in this case, he does have it with Hal because again, we have Hal around here and Hal knows who the father is apparently, and they're going back and forth about that a little bit. And he's actually the one who says, you know, so what if he's a Scot? He's a damn fine swordsman. And that's when he says, well, he was a fucking groom. I hope so. And Hal's like, well, are you going to kill yourself? And he's like, no. And he's like, well, that's good. Anything else is bound to be an improvement. So there we go. Anyway, I said that wrong. But we still have that discussion. It was, I think, in a different part when he says, like, he's the best man I know. But John does say that to him at some point. Sorry. We're rushing through some of this here. Yes, and then we do still too have the part where he finds out that she's been taken. That happens in a different chapter though. So he finds out that Jane's been taken in a different part though. So at the end of chapter 81 is when we have a chapter from Jamie's point of view, and there is people retreating, and so he's making his way back to the church. Now, he didn't know where Tennant Church was because Claire and him were separated in the morning, and he didn't know that. But he had heard that that's where the hospital was set up, so he's like, oh, is that where Claire is? And just as they're making their way there, he sees her. She's working on a soldier, and he sees her get shot, and he sees her fall. And then the last thing she hears is Jamie yelling Sassenach, and she was in the middle of sewing up his head when she got shot. So then we have chapter 82 and is it 82? I think it's all in 82. Yeah. In chapter 82 with her being shot, and all those same things happen where someone's asking him to go and he says, take off your coat, and he writes it in his bloody finger and he says, go and show him. So when the guy says he's going to leave, this is all in Jamie's point of view. And he's like, may the devil eat your soul and salt it well first, you whore. And that's when he calls him a whore. But he does do it in Gaelic. So they did make it in English in here, which is great. And he's like, did you just call him a whore? And he's like, she's awake here. And she's like, I can't have water yet. And so she's like, go get Denny. And then he's been praying the whole way. So she's even like talking to Denny about it and everything. So, yep. So we have that. And then we go into the surgery and we'll stop there because we don't know whether she wakes up, which I mean, we know she wakes up. So anyway, whew. So there we go. Sorry about that. I don't know where I had to splice that and put everything back together, but I definitely had something wrong. I definitely do get things wrong. But as you could tell, that's part of the issue when you're jumping all over, especially with the Roger and Bree stuff. It was tough to see. But again, for the most part, all really good. I was just a little annoyed, like I said, with having her go back to Lallybroch, because if they hadn't left with men literally in her house, people had broken into her house and were waiting for her, and they had to leave in gunfire, I would have been okay with it. I wish that there had been, maybe something left to Ernie and, what's her name? And they get the letter or something else in some other way, because it just makes no sense that she just would go do back in there and whatever. So one of the other things I meant to mention that they have missed, and part of the reason why I thought we might see Tobias Menzies, let me mention that. Not only because they did tease us with a memory of him, and I kind of wonder if there was a scene cut from this. Not with him being in it, but with her remembering something from him. Maybe they decided that if they couldn't have him, then it wouldn't be great. But when she pulls his book out, I thought there would be something in there, because there is a letter that he wrote her where he explains everything, right? He explains everything to her and talks about Jamie and all of these things. And he fills her in on some things and what he did and like why he prepared her and all of these things that he's done, and partially why he focused on certain areas of history was trying to find out about her legacy as well. So all of those things are in that letter. And I know that would have taken a lot of time to like go through it, but I thought we might, just because we had the title card is with Bree and her dad looking at this painting, and then we also have her pick his book off the shelf. So that's why I think they maybe did cut a scene of her reading the letter and we're like, this doesn't really work, or we don't have time for it. Because otherwise those 2 points, I don't know why we have them. Because why does she look at his face if we don't even mention his name at all? She writes the letter to Roger and then it's done. So that was just something I wanted to bring up, that I feel like I don't know, it feels like something was pulled from the episode. And again, I'm not saying it was that they cut a scene of him from it. I don't think they did that. But I think they maybe cut a scene of her reading a letter from him. Maybe it just didn't fit with the intensity of the episode. But I'm glad they're headed back. I'm glad we've crossed off the 1980 time period. Very excited to see where we go. So what do I rate this one? Well, I'm going to put this one at another 8.5 out of 10, because I think it's not quite a 9. Some things were very confusing. There's also the timeline with like Buck and him that they've changed around, but I don't know. I still think the pacing of that whole thing was weird. Like some of the talks that he's having with him about like, you're all my blood, you're all my son, you're whatever. I'm like, why do we need that scene? That should have been them talking about something else. I don't know. I didn't like that. So yeah, I'll give it an 8.5 out of 10. So now finally, what is my predictions? So some of my predictions still remain very true. I think now we're going to head back to the Ridge. There'll definitely be a line of like, can we go home now? Jamie's going to have to, I mean, he's done. He's resigned. He's like, fuck this. I'm taking my injured wife. We've given enough to this freaking war. We're going to go home. And once they get home, you know, again, I think there'll be lots of reflecting. I think there'll be lots of this. I wonder if we'll find out that Rachel's pregnant. I would like us to find out Rachel's pregnant. I think they maybe haven't shown it. Maybe, you know, maybe they'll have a little time jump at some point. That would be my guess. I think they'll show her, you know, waking up and being really weak. And then I think they might skip ahead to them arriving back at the Ridge and her being pregnant. What I would hope, I don't know if this will happen. But I would really like for Jenny to show up at the end. I would like Jenny to be on the Ridge by the end of this, because that happens in the book. Jenny should already be here, by the way. I don't know that would happen, but I would like her to be there for when Ian's baby is born. I wish it so. So that's a wish that I would have. But I think they'll make it back to the Ridge. We'll get to like see it. We need to start rebuilding our home. That is something they're doing at the end of book 8. They're like sleeping around a campfire basically when Roger and Bree and the kids show up. And as I've said many times, the very last scene of what I thought the show would be, like I thought we would end here, and we've really skipped through stuff. Now seeing how they skipped through things, I personally don't feel bereft of that much. I'll save all that for my analysis for the end of the season, right? But while there are some things, and particularly right now I'm rereading an Echo in the Bone, there's a lot more that's left out of Echo in the Bone than that's left out of Written in My Own Heart's Blood. Because Written in My Own Heart's Blood really does fit into the part of like finding out Jamie's still alive, then dealing with Roger and Bree in those scenes, dealing with the battle, and then getting back to the, like those really are those parts of it. So they haven't really left that much out, you know, as of now anyway. So I like seeing that. But yeah, predictions. I thought the show was going to end with it, with Bree and Roger and the kids arriving back at the Ridge. Because to me, the end of that is like it's a hopeful place. It's a happy place to end. So I now think that's where the season will end. I think it will end with hello the house when they arrive there, which was cute because they kind of remind us about hello the house. They say it in this episode, when Roger and Buck go back to Lollybrock, they say hello the house, which that is what happens at the end of Written in My Own Heart's Blood. There's a beautiful scene of Jamie and Claire, and they see this family, and they're like, who's that? And they're redheaded, and they see a little girl drops a doll, and they pick it up, and then they see those kids start running towards them. And the very end of the book is hello the house, a little girl called and she was laughing. Or no, the tall woman pulled off her hat and waved, her long red hair streaming like a banner. Hello the house, she called, and she was laughing. Then I was flying down the hill with Jamie just before me, arms flung wide, the two of us flying together on the same wind. And that's the end. And I hope that we'll get to see that when they get them back. So I think that's where it will end. We'll see Claire getting healed. We'll see Jamie wrapping up what's happening. Well, oh, I totally forgot the stuff with Jane. Yeah, not looking forward to that. That's probably why I blacked it out. There will be a moment where there's some stuff where Jamie helps William with that. And we see that in the preview, so I forgot about that. We need to deal with what happened with Jane, what's possibly going to happen to Jane, and then I think we'll go back to the Ridge, and that's what will happen. So anyway, I've been filming for an hour and 15 minutes. I know this video won't be that long because I have to cut out some significant things, but I had so much to say. So thank you all for watching this. Thank you for making it through this half season with me. And yeah, we have one more of these to go. And if you are interested too, I actually have my Outlander book club that has been going on. And if you wanted to join in, we'll be reading Written in My Own Heart's Blood starting this month after our book club. Actually, when you're watching this episode, book club has like already happened, so there's that. But we're having book club for An Echo in the Bone tonight, and then we'll be reading Written in My Own Heart's Blood. So if you want to reread that with us, you definitely can check us out. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye.